got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with a certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe. I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet.
Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way. Yeah, I'ma do it my way.
I shot my wife in the stomach with 38.
Why did you do this?
She enticed me and she ridiculed me.
Okay, does that work? Can anybody hear me? There we go. There we go. Right, we're live. We're live. Sorry about that. I had not changed my settings in StreamYard. Thank you, Bond. Welcome, welcome. Right, so this is hopefully going to be quite a quick one, and this is about woke versus red pill. The woke like to claim that they are aware, they are awake, they understand reality, they know what's going on. And the red pill likes to claim they are aware, they understand what's going on. And they're both coming from very, very different perspectives. But the question really is, I understand the red pill stuff, where it's coming from my point of view, in terms of reality. But I have found a rather interesting, a very interesting document. And let's add this on here. This document is from the National Library of Medicine, which is an official website of the United States government. And this is a paper called Social Justice and Sociological Theory. And it's going to go into Marxism. And I'm going to lay out that this whole concept around social justice and intersectional theories and intersectional issues and gender issues and race issues and all forms of issues are all based around Marxism, And this is exactly what this paper on this official website of the United States government lays out. So Bradley Campbell wrote this in 2021. It was published online on August the 26th, 2021 at PubMed Central. And it's got an abstract here and it's got a load of context here, which is really useful stuff, but it's a bit bland and it takes a bit of getting through. And so I'm not going to touch on it. What I will say here is in this bit, this one paragraph, the idea of social justice. Any discussion of social justice quickly runs into the problem of how to define it. Friedrich Hayek said he had tried for 10 years to find out what social justice meant and failed. He concluded that the idea was an empty formula conventionally used to assert that a particular claim is justified without giving any reason. Similarly, Michael Novak said social justice is most often an instrument of ideological intimidation that is a term of art whose operational meaning is, we need a law against that. So it goes into more of this stuff. It starts talking about sociology and social justice and the links that there are between those. And it starts to say that the whole concept of the current social justice movement, the social justice activists, who the red pill calls social justice warriors, pejoratively, it starts talking about why they are looking at it from a single lens, which is conflict theory and, in particular, critical theory within this. So here we go. Social justice and sociology. There is a sense in which social justice and sociology are not connected at all. To describe and explain reality is different from evaluating it or changing it. What is different from what ought to be. So what they are saying here is exactly the same as what the red pill says. The red pill says the red pill itself is a praxeology. The praxeology describes and explains reality. Red pill proponents produce prescriptions of what they should do after evaluating that and how things could change, what things ought to be. So red pill is what is, and the red pill prescriptions by the red pill activists is what ought to be. What should we do? How should we act in order to be able to do this? So that's bringing it all together. And the thing is, the woke, the red pill, the social justice activists say exactly the same. This is what this is. The people are coming from two different perspectives. The question is, what is the perspective that the social justice activists are coming from? And it's conflict theory and it's Marxism. Complete Marxism. Marxism has infiltrated our education systems. It has infiltrated every aspect of our universities in teaching everybody this social justice and conflict theory basis. They are using these terms. Social justice has become normative. It is used throughout society. It is used by all politicians in all times, and they don't know where it's from. Because if they did know that it was Marx-based, if they did know it was communist-based, and they knew that it was a revolution against how things have always been in history, they might not be so pro it. Intersectional theory is the other bit. And we're just about to go into this. So I'm only going to read this section of this paper, Social Justice and Conflict Theory. Thomas Kuhn said that scientific revolutions were rare events in the history of science where the dominant paradigm of a discipline, that is, the entire constellation of beliefs, values, techniques, and so on shared by the members of a given community or a given scientific community is replaced by a new paradigm. And the new paradigm is what they are instituting. We are in the middle of this paradigm. There is a conflict going on between these. And unfortunately, everybody that's up in power is pushing for this, whereas everything that this new paradigm is trying to do is to get rid of those people who are in power. So, more relevant to understanding the situation of contemporary sociology, however, is Kuhn's discussion of what he calls pre-paradigmatic science. If we alter Kuhn's definition of a paradigm slightly to include any general framework in which theories are formulated rather than one shared by the entire community, this period before the emergence of a dominant paradigm can be more accurately be called boring as it can possibly be, which is exactly where this paragraph seems to be going. There are usually several paradigms, several different competing strategies of explanation, and that is the current state of sociology. One of the competing strategies of explanation is conflict theory, and it is critical theory. Think about critical race theory, which is one form of conflict theory that informs so much present-day social justice activism. Conflict theory explains human behavior as a struggle for domination. Additionally, conflict theory usually assumes four things. 1, social life involves clashes of interest. 2, clashes of interest involves zero-sum outcomes, where one side's gain is the other's loss. So there's already a bias in there. There's an assumption within there already. Social life involving clashes of interest, that happens all the time. We know that that's true. Clashes of interest are zero-sum outcomes where there are winners and losers. We know there are winners and losers, but it doesn't actually have to be that way all the time. And that's where compromise comes in. That's where a lot of the paradigms of how we have set up all of our systems, particularly contracts, so that there are benefits to both rather than one gains, the other loses. But they're looking at it in a totally different perspective. 3, dominant groups gain at the expense of others. That is an assertion. That is an assumption. There are assumptions of dominant groups. We know there are dominant groups and we know why there are dominant groups. And people who are dominant, people who are, let's say, high value, alpha, merit-based, experts, skillful. They become dominant. They're wise. They can see things other people cannot see. They can produce strategies and tactics to win. We are a competitive race of, we're a competitive species rather than race. And that competition is all about domination. We see it in every aspect of our society. They want to remove that. They want to flip it around. This comes back to this egalitarianism. It comes back to equity. And 4, radical change is the only way to reduce the power of dominant groups. This is revolution. This is a quiet revolution that has managed to get in and is being proposed by the dominant groups. The dominant groups being the elite politicians that are running everything, and they're going, oh, it's social justice, blah, blah, blah. Critical theory, conflict theory, yeah. They're going to get absolutely annihilated by this. Karl Marx was the first to use this approach. For Marx, the clashes of interest were between social classes, and class struggle drives historical change. That was Marx's bit. The whole concept of social justice comes from Karl Marx. In every society, there has been a system of class relations, and social institutions benefit the dominant class and enable the exploitation of others. The clash between classes normally results in a new class system with a new dominant class system. No, with a new dominant class. But Marx believed the overthrow of the current capitalist system, in which the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, who own the means of production, they exploit the proletariat, the workers, who must work for wages. He wants to put an end to class once and for all and lead to a new kind of society. Egalitarianism, equity. There are no merit-based hierarchies. You do not have people who are better than others in Marx's world. Everybody is the bloody same, which is absolute balderdash, complete balderdash. Marxists advocate revolution, and they analyze social relationships and institutions in capitalist societies in terms of how they benefit the bourgeoisie and exploit the proletariat. So everything to do with our society, all of our relationships, how we interact across everybody, and how the institutions have been set up, benefit the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, and exploit the proletariat, the workers. This gives you an idea of why and how this stuff has come in. What it doesn't give you an idea of is how the bloody hell have all of these elite people taken it on and accepted it and gone, rah, 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 let's go for this. For a Marxist studying capitalist societies, the task is not to determine whether or how much capitalists exploit workers. The approach treats exploitation as a constant. It is to be assumed, rather than as a variable to be explained. The task instead is to show how social arrangements lead to exploitation, even if those social arrangements might at first appear liberating. Thus, Marxists have argued that the idea of equality before the law actually furthers inequality. Let's read that again. Marxists argue that the idea of equality before the law, one law for all, actually furthers inequality. That's really concerning because that's exactly what's happening right now. We are no longer having equality before the law. We are having bias and hypocrisy. We do not have one law for all. We are pushing forward inequality against certain people in order to achieve some utopian version of equity. Agreements between capitalists and workers appear legitimate because they are treated as agreements between equals, even though the power dynamics, remember that word, that statement, power dynamics, mean workers are in no position to bargain. The idea of equality disguises inequality and exploitation. Okay. Marx offered a new way of understanding societies and of understanding historical change, but his predictions have failed. The clash between capitalists and workers did not lead to the failure of capitalism and to revolution. In societies where communist parties gained power and abolished class, doing so did not lead to a new kind of society. Government did not wither away, as Marx predicted. Instead, communist reformers established totalitarian governments that were among the most intrusive and violent in history. Abolishing class also did not put an end to conflict and exploitation. Political elites ruled over the masses in the new societies, and they often turned on one another as they pursued power. It's all about domination. Domination does not go away. Competition does not go away when it comes to human beings. The economic systems established also failed, leading to famine, shortages of basic goods, and eventually governments led by communist parties collapsed or made reforms. This is where it starts to get interesting. The orthodox Marxist may be unfazed by any of this. The idea may be that capitalism will still collapse. Revolution is still coming. The revolutions in Russia, China, and elsewhere were not real communist revolutions, and their governments were not real Marxist governments. Marxism has not failed. Real Marxism has not even been tried. But another tack for those sympathetic to Marxist analysis is to accept much of Marx's framework while rejecting many of the specifics. This could mean accepting Marx's class analysis while rejecting his hope for change. But more commonly, it means accepting the conflict framework while rejecting Marx's emphasis on class alone as the source of oppression and the driver of historical change. For most of today's conflict theorists, it is not just class, but also race, gender, sexuality, religion, disability status, immigration status, and much else that gives some people power over others. Otherwise, the analysis is similar. The idea again is that the oppression of disadvantaged groups is a constant to be assumed rather than a variable to be explained. Assumptions are in there. Oppression of disadvantaged groups. Who are the disadvantaged groups? Certain races, certain genders, certain sexualities, certain religions, certain ability, able-bodiedness status, so in this case disability, immigrants, etc. Just as social institutions benefit capitalists at the expense of workers, they benefit whites at the expense of persons of color, men at the expense of women, heterosexuals at the expense of gays and lesbians, the cisgendered at the expense of the transgendered, Christians at the expense of Muslims, the able-bodied at the expense of the disabled, the native-born at the expense of immigrants, etc., in an interlocking system of domination, sometimes called critical theory or intersectional theory. This type of conflict theory follows Marxism in calling for a radical reorganization of social institutions to put an end to oppression. But it is not enough just to deal with class, as Marxists would do. And it is not enough to deal with any other single source of oppression, whether gender, race, or something else. The goal is to put an end to the entire system of oppression. But it has been made very clear throughout this paper that system of oppression is assumed. That system of oppression comes from a particular way of looking at things rather than looking at society as a real status. And don't forget what I said at the beginning, where it talked about the context. The social justice activists who use this Marxist base is looking to change the reality of what is to a social reality of what ought to be, which means getting rid of merit, getting rid of skills, getting rid of expertise, getting rid of this oppression where it's benefiting whites at the expense of persons of color, benefiting men at the expense of women, benefiting heterosexuals at the expense of gays and lesbians, benefiting the cisgendered at the expense of the transgendered, benefiting Christians at the expense of Muslims, benefiting the able-bodied at the expense of the disabled, benefiting the native-born at the expense of immigrants. And this is exactly where intersectional theory comes in. The more that you've got any of these oppressed traits, the more you deserve social justice. It all comes from Marx. And their whole proposal, their goal, is to put an end to the entire system of oppression. The new conflict theorists also follow Marxists in analysing interactions and institutions, including those that might at first appear innocuous or even liberating, as sources of oppression. Laws, prisons, and wars contribute to oppression, but so do cultural practices and even ordinary conversations. This is what these people think. This is the war we are in. One idea is that members of oppressed groups frequently experience microaggressions, another favorite terminology, which are small slights that make their lives unpleasant and block them from success. When a person of color goes to college and sees portraits honoring mostly white men who have contributed to the university or achieved success in the past, this might be a microaggression. Understand where these people are coming from. You need to understand it, and you need to understand what kind of war we are in. Or it might be a microaggression when whites in conversation ask Asians where they are from. These things contribute to people feeling marginalized, and they add up. Those who do not accept this framework may reject the idea of microaggression, particularly the idea that the attentions of the microaggressor do not matter. Unfortunately, this paper starts missing a few words here occasionally, and it needs a bit deciphering. Basically, what this is saying is it's not the microaggressor who has any argument whatsoever if they have done a microaggression against somebody else. Somebody who feels they have received a microaggression is the one who has been wronged. They are the oppressed, and you cannot do anything about it. You've done the aggression. But what makes something a microaggression is that it furthers the oppression of those who are already disadvantaged, and it does not matter how well-intentioned somebody is or was. Microaggression is just one of the concepts derived from critical theories that outsiders might find unfamiliar and objectionable. Other new kinds of offences include cultural appropriation, something else we've heard about, such as when members of a dominant culture adopt the clothing styles or eat the foods associated with marginalized cultures. What is going on? This is a paper on a US government website. Heteronormativity, when someone makes a statement that implies heterosexuality is normal, on the basis that that's what the vast majority is and always has been. And white fragility, when whites are defensive over being confronted with their racism and privilege. There's a load of assumptions in there, isn't there? Another concept that can be jarring to outsiders is the idea of white supremacy. In more mainstream contexts, white supremacy refers to things like Jim Crow laws that segregated whites and blacks and banned blacks from certain places. And white supremacists are Ku Klux Klansmen and others who favor such laws. But the new conflict theorists talk about mainstream institutions today as white supremacist institutions. All mainstream institutions now are white supremacist institutions. This will change a bit because they'll need to get rid of all of the men soon. So they'll call them supremacist male institutions soon, because they'll have to get rid of the white supremacist bit, because the white women won't like it. They'll all have to identify as non-white women, because gender and sex are also oppression aspects. They speak of those who oppose revolutionary change as white supremacists. You can see how the rhetoric actually ramps up. A white supremacist was a Ku Klux Klansman, was a really quite nasty person. Could use the German word, National Socialist, the nasties. You could use that. They were white supremacists. But no, white supremacists is now your standard institutions, your educational establishments, your governments, your justice system. Everything is white supremacist, and it needs to be taken down. And not only taken down, people who are from the dominant oppressing trait areas, they need to be kicked down. And everybody else needs to be raised up merely because of traits, on the basis that they have historically been oppressed. Excuse me. It is not that they believe these people are Klansmen or that the Klan or similar groups run mainstream institutions. It is that they see society's institutions as protecting the advantages whites have over persons of color. And this is the sense in which those institutions and those who defend them contribute to white supremacy. This is the stuff that is being taught to all your children. This is why so many women who go to university choose things like sociology, gender studies, critical race theory studies. It's all based on this Marxist ideology. This is why we suddenly have this major problem coming up. This is also why, but Pearl Davis doesn't understand why she's arguing for it. This is also why Pearl Davis is arguing that women should not be allowed to vote. By now, most people are familiar with at least some of these concepts. Increasingly, they are not just the argot of critical theorists in academia. Concepts like microaggression, cultural appropriation, white supremacy have made their way into workshops at universities and corporations and into the mainstream media and in public debate. Usually they are presented in the context of efforts to pursue social justice. All of those words come from Marxism, every single one of them. They are all based on conflict theory and critical theory, which is all based on Marxism. And both the advocates and opponents of these ideas tend to see them that way, with the advocates using the term positively and the opponents using it pejoratively, such as by referring to social justice activists as social justice warriors. The result is that social justice often becomes synonymous with a particular theoretical approach and with particular remedies. Social justice activists draw heavily from critical theory, a type of conflict theory. But it is not just conflict theorists and those who adopt the conflict framework who are concerned with social justice. And there is no reason that theoretical perspectives other than conflict theory could not form the basis for other kinds of social justice activism. So that's all. That's what I wanted to read out. Bond is asking for a link. So let's see. I don't know if Brojo's out there as well. I have no idea how many are watching. What I was trying to do there was just highlight where all of this change has come from. And it has been a very, very clever strategy from these people ever since the 1960s, ever since they started taking over educational establishments and the educational system, since they started taking over the political systems, who was being voted in, the whole concepts of why marriage and family life has fallen down the wayside, which had all happened way by 1980. I really don't understand how marriage has managed to cling on in any way, shape, or form. But it has had particularly big impacts on, I would say, communities that have these particular traits, particularly race traits, the Black communities. They seem to have been screwed over by this whole system, because the women in their area have absolutely fucked up their communities. I thought I was really doing well. I thought I was doing really well at not swearing throughout this. So if anybody wants to come in, that link will be there for approximately 1 minute. And if nobody's come in by then, I am going to end the stream. So just to highlight again, I'll go back to the top. This is a paper from the National Library of Medicine, which is an official website of the United States government, it was provided to the PMC COVID-19 collection by Springer Nature. Bradley Campbell's paper on social justice and sociological theory, published in Society on the 26th of August, 2021. And it gives a very, very clear indication of exactly where these people have got all of their ideas from. It's all straight from Marxism. If you do not believe that America, the UK, the whole of the EU has undergone a secret Marxist revolution since the 1960s, and it has been a very successful Marxist revolution, I have to say. The question is, what do you do about it? So I'm in the praxeology camp. I can now see where this has come from. I can now understand why we are where we are at, why we have all of these things, how it was done. The question is, who's going to do something about it to stop them really fucking the world over? And with that, I'm going to end the stream. Good night, everybody.